Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fresh Outlook. I'm Mia Toski. We thank you for your company this week, but we begin the note of the show on a solemn note. A major investigation is now underway after a Malaysian airline goes missing under very odd circumstances. The plane was not reported missing for hours, and 2 people on board had stolen passports. It will be a desperate wait for the families, and from everyone here at Fresh Outlook, our hearts are with you. We turn now to the Ukraine. We asked the question last week, will we be talking about the Ukraine and Turkey on this week's show? Well, with so many new developments in both countries, the answer is yes. Let's begin first with the Ukraine.
Lawmakers in Crimea declared their intention to split from Ukraine and join Russia, and scheduled a referendum in 10 days for voters to decide the fate of the disputed peninsula. Ukraine's economy minister, Pavlo Sheremeta, said such a referendum was unconstitutional.
We need to bring the whole discussion into the constitutional field. We need to bring it into constitutional terms.
Aside from its political crisis, Ukraine faces grave economic challenges, including crippling debt, a gaping hole in public finances, and the risk of bankruptcy. And that has the Ministry of the Economy thinking ahead.
Approximately in 1 month, most people will decide where to go for summer holidays. And I don't think that Crimea, under current conditions, would be in the top of their list.
The U.S. has so far pledged $1 billion and is working on a more comprehensive package in coordination with the EU and the International Monetary Fund.
And here we are, all sitting in the same spots as we were last week. We welcome Didi Benki to the show, Dr. Alexander Marescu, and of course we also have Sebastian Alou, international affairs expert, and of course Dr. Alexander Marescu is from St. Peter's University. So thank you again for being here, and here we are talking about the Ukraine again. Is it fair to say that this isn't really this isn't going to become a Cold War as we keep seeing on the headlines because this is such a globalized economy? Is that a fair statement to make, Didi?
Well, we leave it up to Putin, there would be. I mean, this guy's still going for the Russian Empire. I mean, I think after a week has gone by, we see that there's resolve. He's not backing up. He's going to get away with anything he can, and he knows that Obama has done nothing thus far. So all we can do now is try to help give money to our friends and tell Putin that we're not going to stand for it. But so far, that's not happened. That's unfortunate. So does he want a Cold War? Yes. Can that happen? Absolutely. He's in an alternative universe. You know, he really thinks that he can bring back the Russian Empire.
But how vulnerable is Russia's economy also? I mean, that's one of the questions. I mean, Putin's no fool. We know that. So they lost 12% on the market this week. Doesn't Putin have a lot to lose in this globalized economy? And Sebastian will...
Yeah, I think he does. First of all, half of his economy is very dependent on imports. He's importing pretty much everything, beginning from food, from meat, dairy products, vegetables, fruits. He has to import. He doesn't have production power to produce enough food for the whole population. So the European Union and the United States actually have a lot of tools to press him to back off from Crimea or eventually to expand his invasion.
And we certainly want to talk about some of those options a little bit later on, but what if something like Gazprom, Russia's energy giant, were to pull out supplies? I mean, Germany is the one country that relies so heavily on that oil. What if that were to happen?
I would say already Gazprom has made some moves in the past week to say to the Ukrainian government, well, we've given you favorable under-market rates for years. Here's the bill, you have to pay it, just like any other country would in a bilateral energy market or contractual market. I agree that the Russian and the Ukrainian economies are very, very deeply intertwined. This is not something that can be so easily divided out. Russia needs the Ukraine primarily for pipeline transit. Ukraine alternatively needs Russian petroleum. If there's nothing to put through their pipelines, then they can make no rents off of that. And ultimately, you can see that the Western Europe, led largely by Germany, has been taking not a conciliatory line, but they have been much more sensitive in the potential outfall in what sanctions to seek against Russia.
Do you think that the European Union will really be unified?
Well, I would like for them to do something. That would be good. I really think that the rest of the world needs to realize what Putin is all about. And we do need to help Ukraine. We need to strengthen Ukraine with money. And because Russia, they basically have threatened, we're just going to freeze you out. We've got the petroleum, we've got the energy. If you don't do what we ask, we can freeze you out. You know, that's not good. That's not right. And that's what United States, I mean, at least Republicans and Democrats, we are Americans. We are united on this with saying that what Putin is doing is wrong. It's not right to the Ukrainians.
And I also want to talk about the media right now. 2 Ukrainian stations have been replaced by Russian TV in the southern area.
They're trying to do the same thing in Ukraine, as a matter of fact. You know, they're calling to cut off all Russian language TV in the eastern part of Ukraine, so it's just going tit for tat. But you know, you asked about European Union. Actually, is a very good question. The EU has to stay united, and it's a very big role for the United States actually to unite the whole European Union, because we see we are a lot of countries we are more pro-Russian, like Germany. Even David Cameron, he is not really willing to impose any kind of sanctions. So it's a real big role for the United States actually to get the European Union behind all the sanctions, all the idea to be to create a very united bloc against Putin.
And Dr. Maresca?
Yeah, and I would agree with that statement. There is one major difficulty in the U.S.'s attempts to unify Europe, and this is a pretty big mistake that the Obama administration has made over the last month. The Obama administration more or less walked out on the recreation of some sort of intelligence sharing agreement with Germany, which left the Germans pretty disappointed. I was in Greece in January speaking with members of the European Parliament, and there was a lot of consternation and a lot of disappointment in the Obama administration's lack of engagement on European policy. It's tended to look in other areas, the Middle East, East Asia, and now in a way Obama is working from a bit of a confidence deficit that he has to somehow unite these people who have kind of lost trust in the way that intelligence sharing has been taking place, and this will largely also be an intelligence war.
That's an interesting term that you use there. I'm sorry.
It also comes back to the situation, the policy of leading from behind. It's not the kind of a crisis that you can actually lead from behind. You have to step in, you have to unite the people. Yeah. Europe can be divided, that's why we know we really need the United States and the President Obama actually to do something.
Well, I brought up the media because here in the U.S., Russian TV is broadcast in New York City and throughout the nation and the world. One of the newscasters this week basically got up and resigned and walked off the air. Let's take a look.
Reporter on this network, I face many ethical and moral challenges, especially me personally, coming from a family whose grandparents came here as refugees during the Hungarian Revolution, ironically to escape the Soviet forces. And that is why personally I cannot be part of a network funded by the Russian government that whitewashes the actions of Putin. And that is why after this newscast, I'm resigning.
Think about that.
Loved it. Good for her. I mean, you know what? She's like, look, we're, you know, that's my home country. I mean, that's wrong what Putin's doing, and she's on RT, so she decided that she couldn't work for an organization that's, you know, going to hide things and turn it up and be like China. You know, I mean, that's what happens in these countries whenever they have nationalized media. That's wrong. I
could relate partially to what the moderator was saying. In part because my parents fled communist Europe from Romania. This is something that you and I probably share, that while communism had some good parts, it was largely a political failure on many areas. One of the nice things was something we celebrate today, the International Day of the Woman. So I'd like to extend that to all the viewers. But concerning this walkout by this moderator, obviously tremendous amounts of pressure on RT. I don't know how much pressure is happening on Western newscasters. If there's any pressure or constraints in making sure that a particularly anti-Russian message is being portrayed.
Well, they are saying that they're not allowing some of the reporters into Crimea. There are reports that they're painting the Russian flag, but we're not really so sure in certain military bases over there. Poland also pulled out some of their key personnel out of the area.
This morning, as a matter of fact, they evacuated the Polish consulate in Crimea, which was the only diplomatic post of the whole European Union. So that was, but a lot of things going on in Poland. The Putin is starting, he actually conducted military exercises just north of Poland. Poland responding by, you know, strengthening the northern border. But since you mentioned RT, as a matter of fact, this is the problem of the whole Putin's propaganda. You know, he's controlling the whole media in Russia. He's feeding, you know, Russian people wrong information, to the point that actually Anna Applebaum, she's a journalist for the Washington Post and privately a wife of the Polish foreign minister, she said that, you know, we reached this weird point in history that actually the dictator is believing his own propaganda. This is pretty much what's going on. He's a dictator, you know. He doesn't believe the same values that you believe in. He doesn't believe in democracy. He doesn't believe in freedom, freedom of speech. You know, he doesn't believe in all the values that you have in the Declaration of Independence and your own constitution.
Well, let's talk about some of the options, because I believe that we'll probably be back here next week talking about this. But what are some of the options? Obviously, Obama's trying to unify many other Western leaders, calling for sanctions, calling for freezes, visa bans, travel bans. Is this going to be enough?
Well, I think we have to make sure and stand by Ukraine, because Ukrainians don't want this. I mean, even last night there was an artist on television saying, look, Putin, you need to get out. You need to leave us alone. We don't want this. Ukrainians do not want this. Crimea is a little different. I mean, because they do, you know, have some support there. So perhaps, I mean, is that something you could offer, and will you be happy with it? With people like Putin, probably not.
But it is interesting that you say Crimea, because about 2 million people there, about a quarter are actually Ukrainians who do look to the West, and about another 100,000 are actually Muslim. So about 3/4 of Crimea, the region, actually would probably side with Russia. But the question is that enough for Putin?
I mean, it's clearly enough, because he's using this card by saying that he's been asked by the local parliament to act as a protective force. I was doing a short interview with an ethnic Russian from the eastern city of Dnipropetrovsk, and indeed, this is someone who has no love for Putin, but ethnic Russians, for a few reasons, are scared about what a future in a opposition-led Ukraine would look like. In 2010, the prior administration had introduced very, very strict language laws that demoted the use of the Russian language throughout the Ukraine. We're talking about like half the population speaks Russian. It's a very, very unwise move. If you want to talk about joining the EU, you have to recognize language minority rights. It's a very big issue. The first thing that now the new interim government has done is that they've reinstituted that law. That was really one of the first things. And again, de-escalation needs to take place on all sides. It needs to take place in a united EU, United States foreign policy. The opposition needs to cool down with some of its nationalist rhetoric, and Russia needs to soften its position to start speaking.
And I want to talk about the United States. Do you think at this point right now we need to be united as a country and actually support President Obama? There's a lot of opposition to his foreign policy, but by the same token, this is a very serious situation. Should we be more united as a country right now? And I'll let everybody take
Definitely. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I was watching the Foreign Relations Committee proceedings in the Congress the other day, and actually was very glad to see that there is bipartisan support. A lot more needs to be done. Now, the big question is, you know, what about your recent policy toward Russia? It has to be readjusted, because it's pretty much based on a very false premise. Now, what the United States could do, I think they can do so much. Whereas, you know, a lot of people are saying we're not going to send that troop. Fine. Nobody wants your troops over there, because nobody wants another war. But there is so much in between just doing nothing and sending the troops. All the economic sanctions can hit Putin really very hard. You have to increase the price, so he knows that if he annexes, you know, Crimea, the price is going to be so much for him financially that it's going to hurt him.
Sebastian, I don't want to cut you off. Wonderful insights, but I want to give everybody an opportunity to answer that question.
I would kindly disagree. I don't think economic sanctions are going to matter that much for Putin. The West made a bit of a mistake. They've really they thought that this was Georgia 2.0, and it's not. The Ukraine plays a very, very deep historical role in Russian identity, linguistically, religiously. Georgia does not play that same role. That's kind of been the comparison that comes up. I think symbolically already some very thin-veiled economic sanctions have been reduced, and there are probably some deeper sets along that diplomatic protocol. But what really needs to be shown is that Russia has acted with a heavy hand, and it needs to be isolated, not economically, but it needs to be isolated in how it's behaved.
Well, unfortunately, we're here at the vacuum because President Obama, there was no leadership, showed weakness. But now, I mean, he's put us in this pickle. However, now we do need to come together, Republicans and Democrats, all Americans, to help the Ukraine.
All right, well, thank you so much. We are out of time for this segment, but we've got much more coming up, including a look at the latest news from Turkey. The country's under fire prime minister is now warning his government could ban social media. We'll talk about the latest developments when we return.